Internal Comedy, How to Infuse Humor into Your Internal Comms. And Charlie, we met at IABC at the World Conference in Montreal this year. And he kind of had me laughing from the get-go. As a former internal communicator myself, I thought that his work would hopefully be very valuable for all of the wonderful people that we serve at StaffBase with our platform and product. So Charlie, I am going to throw it over to you, and I'll keep my invisible cloak for now.
Great. Sounds good, Carla and Peter. It's great to be with you today, and welcome to Internal Comedy. I feel like humor infusion is like a very scientific term. Kind of sounds like something that Elon Musk is developing, but also sounds kind of medical, like the key to sending out an all-staff memo is an IV full of punchlines. But I am going to demystify this for you all today and show you how it can be fun and really easier than you think to make your internal comms funny. So as your introduction said, I'm Charlie Nadler, the Chief Creative Officer of Laugh Dealer, and a little bit about our company. We embed a comedic voice into your brand. We work with organizations and individuals, extraterrestrials if they were to visit, as long as they come peacefully. And we really pride ourselves on matching the point of view of the work, which we feel is the best way to make your humor organic and interesting. I co-founded the company with a childhood friend, Dr. Kaya Holland. He wasn't a doctor when we were kids. We just had a lemonade stand together, but he is Grady, has a PhD in electrical engineering, and we're having a ton of fun with this business. A little bit about myself, basically the cliff notes on my adulthood. I studied communications at Boston University with a concentration in screenwriting. Had a good time in Boston. It was the first place where a driver passed me around the median, which was a new experience for me. After BU, I moved out to Los Angeles for close to a decade. I worked in film and TV. Most notably at Castle Rock Entertainment, where I worked for Rob Reiner, which was really a masterclass in running a business that tells stories, and very thankful for that experience. It led me to begin performing stand-up comedy, which I've been doing, again, for close to a decade, and something that's very near and dear to me. I ended up in this place called the Hollywood Hotel, their basement, and it used to be a hospital. And when it was a hospital, the basement was the morgue. So I went to all these open mics, basically in a former morgue, which is pretty apropos for open mic comedy. Eventually, I relocated back to New York City, where I am today, to further the craft of writing and performing, and all led to starting this company. So let's jump right in. As you can see, we got some cliche bullet points for you because it's not a webinar until we bullet it. Today we're going to talk about the importance and impact of humor at work. And we're going to talk about the key learnings from our company, specifically within the lens of the current economy and also the future of work and how that's going to look, which I feel like informs a lot of our work today. We're going to talk about entry points for your jokes, which is an area that I find very exciting and we'll dig into. And we'll talk about StaffBase as a comedy instrument for delivering these jokes. And then we'll finish by touching on best practices and barriers for using comedy in internal comms and how to avoid pitfalls. So when I think about the impact of humor at work and the importance of it, I basically think about this sort of waterfall of employee engagement that occurs when you are funny with your workforce. And it starts with listening. You'll notice whenever somebody is being humorous, people stop to listen because they don't want to miss what's coming next. And it just makes it a very powerful tool to convey information to your people and get them to trust you. When they're listening, they're obviously going to be learning about what you need to convey or what they need to be doing. If they're listening and learning, they're going to be present. And if they're present, the leadership will be able to be persuasive, and not in a negative way. When I think about presence and persuasion, I'm thinking more about retention of the information that's being conveyed, and also retention of the employees being happy where they are and being engaged in their work and in the leadership. And then the second sort of grouping I like to think about is connections. So I like to use comedy club analogies when I talk about this work because it's very apropos. When I'm in a comedy show, one of my favorite reactions is when there's a big punchline and you're in the audience, and instead of just laughing, you'll see people in the crowd turn to whoever they're with, and it's that moment of acknowledgement and sharing in that premise, in that punchline. And I think about that also with humor at work. So if you're being funny and you're getting your employees to talk about it, you're really helping to build connections between them, and that's a very powerful thing. And those connections end up being revitalization for the workforce. When your employees are talking and laughing together, they sort of pool their energy, and it's very revitalizing. And that informs what they think of the leadership. You know, there's a lot of data out there that funny leaders are considered smarter leaders. I mean, that's you know, more of a anecdotal, but it is something that people report, and that is a powerful tool to have in your leadership toolkit. And lastly, health. You know, I really think that humor is a wellness tool. Obviously, there's the stress relief involved with having your workforce laugh, and there's also just the overall wellness of the workforce when they're having fun together and not taking things so seriously, but still being engaged in their work. So onto the key learnings that we've had from our company and the work we've done so far. So one of the really big headlines here is that the economy we're in right now demands engagement from your workforce. It's, you know, one of the most robust economies we've seen in a long time. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal in early July that was basically saying that employees are leaving at the fastest rate since the internet boom 17 years ago, and they're leaving for better jobs, more higher paying jobs. So it's a very good time to quit your job, which is scary for employers. Also, just future of work. There are studies that say that they're estimating the current graduates now will have 30 different jobs in 3 distinct careers. So it's much harder to keep somebody within an organization for a long time. They have a lot of opportunity, and they can be very mobile with their careers. So engagement really comes in as a huge tool when you're trying to increase an employee's time at your organization. Secondly, we're finding that our work is surprisingly novel. There are some consultants out there that are doing similar work that we're doing, but still, people are still finding out the benefits of really infusing humor into their cultures, and you see it a lot in the startup worlds. That's definitely getting to be very popular. You know, people having ping pong tables and kegs in their kitchens. So we're just happy to keep spreading the word of humor and making things more enjoyable for your employees. And third, successful humor comes from strong copy and effective delivery. And this is true whether you're performing stand-up or whether you are working in internal comms. So basically what we believe in is having a strong point of view to start with your content, and very specific content that you're conveying, and you can use that as the building blocks for punchlines and making stuff very funny. And like a comedian who might have good jokes but also has to work on effective delivery, your jokes are nothing unless you have a really good delivery mechanism, which is why I'm excited to talk about Staffbase today as well, because it's a great platform to disseminate information in a multitude of ways, and it really lends itself well for jokes and for humor. So now we're going to get into entry points for your jokes, and the theme I like to think about for this is really thinking of your internal comms function as almost an entertainment studio, like a Warner Brothers. You have so many different teams and divisions and types of content that you really have a lot of different channels that you can use for your content. So what I did here is I pulled a very helpful infographic from one of Staffbase's ebooks from their website. that kind of breaks down different areas of internal comms and different types of communications for your workforce. And what we'll do next is break it down into these different groups, and we can talk about how these are, different channels and different jokes for different folks, if you want to say it like that. So for the information section, really information is something that should stick. It should be something that's accessible for your organization. And what's great about adding humor to informative content is that if it's enjoyable, people will want to access instead of just knowing they can access it. So for example, if you went to your employee directory and it says something like, finally learned the name of Hummus Guy, that would be a fun way to use the directory. I think we've all worked with a Hummus Guy. I never found out what his name was. Hopefully one day I'll figure it out. For communication, it's something that really should engage, and it's something that should be also fun, and you also want it to be something that's you want to create must reads. Not everyone's going to be forced to read stuff in your organization, but if you create something that's entertaining, they will tell their colleagues about it, and it'll help spread the word of something that's important, such as a single sign-on tool that only takes 387 questions to activate, which is obviously a joke, but a fun play on a single sign-on tool type premise. Collaboration is something that should go viral. I mean, the whole point of collaboration is to bring your people and your teams together. The last figure I saw was something like over 3 billion workers in the world are not tied to desks and don't use computers as a main part of their job. And so we live in a time now where you really need to find ways to help close the gaps and help make people feel closer than they actually are geographically. And humor is a great tool to really narrow those divides. Here is just purely entertainment content, a video of best practices for kickball. I'm not sure if that actually exists, but I think I just aspirationally wanted it to. I played kickball recently and I bunted, and apparently you're not allowed to bunt in kickball. So I do not know best practices for kickball, and something I have to work on in the future. Services are something that should aid retention. One thing to be frank is that a lot of us have jobs where there are a lot of tasks that are very boring to do, and while you might not be able to get rid of boring tasks, you can make the copy much more enjoyable and at least brighten up someone's day. So this is an example of booking a meeting room, and words of your meeting room is reserved, but it promises to be sociable. So that's a fun way to add some levity into the mundane. So now we're going to get into some specific granular ways to use staff base as a comedy instrument, which is really exciting to me because as I was learning more about the organization, I really was able to find a lot of cool ways that people could infuse jokes into the content that is accessible on this platform. And let's dive into the first part of this content, which is static content. And that's something that I feel that people don't always think about, but I think it's a really good way to dip your toes into the comedy waters. I mean, when people think about jokes, they think about blog posts or other notifications or maybe social media content that's recurring and always new that you can make funnier. But don't forget that you have a lot in your organization that people are going to see every day that you can make more enjoyable. So this first example is a menu. This is a perfectly wonderful menu that's informative and has a lot of things that you need. And here's an example of if you took that menu and just made it a little more engaging, just add a little more fun to each of the choices that you might have. For example, if I'm at a menu and I see event registration, I may register for something, but something like shenanigans really catches my eye and is the kind of thing that I would be very excited to sign up for some shenanigans. And also, it's not just menus, you have headers, you have sub pages, you have pop-ups. There's a lot of different ways to look at your static content and make it funnier. And it's a great way to start if you want to make your intranet and internal comms funnier, because that's the kind of stuff that a large portion of your employees will see, since it's so visible and upfront. So in more recurring content, you have stuff like posts, and one of the issues that we grapple with as a society is the ever shrinking attention span of everyone. So the longer your content, you're always going to deal with people who might tune out or might not retain the information. So, one good tactic that a comedian uses is to always sort of set up humorous goalposts throughout content so that people have something to anchor in and laugh about and keep them listening, keep them learning until the next joke. So this example is just a statement about traditional advertising and how people are paying less attention to commercials, and they'll be forced to use more product placement and things like news, sports, and even the weather. And this is a good example of how you can take your content as it is when it's not funny and isolate premises or things that that can be used in a funny way. And the term I use to talk about that is flint, so something that sparks a funny idea. So in this sentence, product placement in the weather was something that I found very funny. So an example of a joke that you could use is a meteorologist in that situation. Folks, on the Doppler, you'll see our storm, shaped like a 2018 Ford Fusion. Luckily, like a pimple treated with Proactive, it should clear up by Friday. It's a fun goalpost to set it up. Another thing people don't always think about is notifications, a simple push notification. And if you're like most people like myself, most of your apps have notifications enabled, so it's very cluttered. It's sort of a spam feature on the display of your phone, but it can be a very powerful way to engage your employees, especially with information that you might need. So here's just a simplification that's informing a staff that office will close at 2 p.m. today in honor of Halloween. Perfectly good information, not funny. Here's that notification with a little spin on it. Our office will close at 2 p.m. today in honor of Halloween, at which point this push notification will put on its blog post costume. What I like about this example is just a reminder that you have content that's ready to be punched up and funnier, and you can work from that instead of a blank slate. So this is a push notification. It's about Halloween. So therefore, writing a joke about a push notification that has a costume is much easier than having a blank slate and trying to think of what a funny push notification might be. And it's also grounded in information that's important, maintaining your point of view and specificity, which we feel is the most important way to have organic humor in your comms. Now here's an example of a concept that we really, in stand-up comedy and in any kind of communications, is really helpful to have an icebreaker. You typically have about 30 seconds to engage with an audience, and that can really dictate how effective of a communicator you are in the next even 30 minutes. So we always recommend starting with something very funny to get people engaged, and having those goalposts in between your content if it's long form, and then always having a fun closer joke too to make things resonant at the end. So here's an example of an intro to something about Precision Nutrition Level 2 certification. What is it? It's very intensive, has many components. That is very boring and has 0 laughs. Here's an example of what is Precision Nutrition Level certification. It basically means you have a black belt in quinoa. A fun little joke to get people excited about this certification course. Next, the nice thing about humor, when you use it internally especially, is it can really be a powerful tool to educate people and convey interesting information and make that memorable for them. So this is an example of training in a hospital about the patient population. The fact is that the average patient there is 88 years old. Their healthcare experience is quite dated compared to what we are used to now. It's a true statement, but also pretty boring. Here's the same way to convey that type of information. Our average patient is 88 years old. they say things like, "In my day, we paid our copay to Christopher Columbus," which is a fun way to talk about a person who's nostalgic for the past. And I will say here that the nice thing about internal comms is it can be a little more informal. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend you putting this on a pamphlet at this hospital for external purposes. But when you have an internal culture, internal comms, you can use information and jokes to just make people comfortable. I mean, training is a very stressful thing for most folks when they're starting a job. So if you use comedy in your training materials and information materials, it really adds a layer of comfort to them as they onboard. Here's an example of a case study from a client that we worked with that engaged us as a pharmaceutical client, and they were starting a field rotation program. And this is an example of a joke that we use for them to help engage and retain their employees. So they had a sentence about their program overview and what coverage they were going to provide, and for territories that were vacant, such as sabbaticals, maternity, paternity leave, medical leave, or alien abduction is what we added, just to keep people on their toes, with a little clarifier down here. Alien abduction doesn't count as a vacancy, but does significantly improve one's street cred. And by adding jokes in this kind of material, it really helped with the longer content, like I said, having the goalposts, keeping people engaged in the whole presentation, because it was an important time for them. This was a program that was new and that they wanted to engage with their current talent in-house. People were going to be rotating from their home office into the field, and we really needed to help them combine education with fun, add sizzle to something that really was a problem that they were trying to solve, and most importantly, related to the earlier headlines that I mentioned about the changing workforce and people jumping around, is that really this kind of work helps attract internal talent, spread the word to new opportunities in-house, so they can grow within an organization instead of looking to go outside and grow somewhere else. And it's a good, another thing I'll say for the next slide is that on the flip side, one nice thing about talent jumping around is that if you can establish yourself as a fun place to work, a lot of funny internal comms for your staff, you might be able to be those big fish that land these jumping talent into your organization. So now we'll talk a little bit about best practices for infusing internal humor into your comms. You should not write jokes just because they fit into it being funny. They should really fit the content that you already have. So that's why we really feel like the most authentic humor is stuff that comes from your own organization's point of view and draws from the specificity of the content that you have already. We like to think of your content as kind of a clothing line where you would hang clothes to dry, and the jokes are just pins that you put along that line, so you're fitting it into your organic material. Also, it should be clean and correct. This goes without saying, but it should be PG, nothing at all risque, and it should be politically correct. You should really focus on low or zero risk topics. Really avoid any topics that are hot button issues: politics, religion, gender, ethnicity. Our rule of thumb is if you're not sure if something is a risky topic to joke about, then don't joke about it. There's plenty of punchlines in the sea, and it's not worth walking the line or crossing the line with a joke, since there are plenty of better, more PG jokes out there. As far as barriers go, there are a lot of concrete cultures. These are usually organizations that have been around for decades or 100 years, and they've always had a way of doing things, and it might be hard initially to convince your internal comms folks that things should be funnier, but there's a lot of arguments that hopefully I've spelled out well in earlier slides about, if you keep it PG, people won't worry if it's appropriate. People think that maybe it takes too much time, but it also takes a lot of time to go out and recruit new talent if you're losing employees. So there's a lot of really good reasons to help push back against sort of concrete, more buttoned up cultures, and the startup world is helping with that shift. Scheduled content is something that we caution against a lot. It's very helpful to use something like a Hootsuite or other scheduling software to line up your material that you might be sending out. Is definitely true for your external comms, but anything internal too, you should really be careful about the timing of when you're telling a joke. And it's better to just post in the moment when you're ready, and make sure that you're not, for example, posting during a natural disaster. It might be in poor taste, or some other moment where you have an unintended consequence where your joke is just very poorly timed with something that's not even related, but in the moment it can be bad. And as we know, the court of public opinion is always in session, so you really should be mindful of how your jokes are going to play in the time that you post them. Joker's block is something that people worry about, and hopefully, if you draw from the flint that you already have and really focus on the content that you've already put together, that can inspire jokes based on that, and you're really standing on the shoulders of your content. And then we, obviously recommend finding someone with some of that talent and who's put in some of that time, whether it's someone like us or if it's just a very funny colleague in your organization who you think could be creative and infuse some fun into your communications. Legal is a barrier that we are very mindful of. Obviously, there are some things that you just really probably shouldn't punch up, terms and conditions. Really anything legal or regulatory is just something that is best left to be straightforward and not be cheeky about, and make sure you're doing the right thing there. So in summary, humor is a wellness tool and something that's good for the individual and also for the group, and also great for the leadership and help with stress, and really can't recommend it enough in life. I mean, comedy clubs exist because humor is a wellness tool. Basically, people just go out there and pay a lot of money for tickets and drinks to sit there and laugh at ideas. So it's a well-proven and helpful concept that we hope you all embrace. Your content is the flint to spark the jokes that are awaiting all of your internal comms. To do that, really have to focus on your own point of view of your organization, the specificity, drawing from the content that you've already created and that you already have, so that you can really have solid jokes that fit your current culture as it is already. Back to the best practices, PG and PC hilarity will always win. It really is the best way to make sure that you are pleasing a broad employee base. And lastly, humor is everywhere. It's a renewable resource, in my opinion, and it's just a gift that you can wake up every day and go to your job and look around and really find inspiration everywhere and find ways to make it funnier. And what I will do is I will leave you with a parting thought regarding humor being everywhere, and to keep your eyes and ears open, and you'll create some humor, but honestly, sometimes humor is gift wrap for you. When I was putting this presentation together recently, I stepped away from my desk to get some water, and my cat made the next slide. And I just thought that was perfect, and that made me crack up. I had a cat translator take a look at this, and unfortunately, it's not safe for work, so I can't tell you what it means. But I will leave it at, I'd love to take any questions that you guys have, and please also feel free to reach out. I have my contact information here. More than happy to have discussions, answer any questions. If you want to give me a buzz or shoot me a note, I love talking about comedy and how to make employment funnier. And I really appreciate it and hope you guys learned a couple things and had some fun.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I'm trying to make this a little bit smaller so we can see if any of our attendees have questions today. What are some common questions that you get when you're working with clients, Charlie?
Sure. So some of the common questions are around how people can kind of create a humor strategy for their organization, and a lot of people want to know where to start. Typically, we'll suggest one project. So let's say maybe there's a town hall coming up, and we'll suggest that they make that deck funny or make some internal talking points funnier and see how that plays with the organization. We also focus a lot on the static content that you'll get a lot of mileage out of, that you'll also have a big audience for. So, for example, if you make an onboarding checklist funny, you're going to be helping new employees. But if you make a menu funny, or if you make something that everyone has to interact with, you have a much greater chance of reaching more of your employees and get a little more power out of those jokes.
Right. What do you say to someone who says, "I'm not funny. I don't know what to write"? I know internal communicators are busy people, and they have so many things in their buckets that they're tasked with on a daily basis. I would feel that way if that was a challenge for me. What do you tell them?
Sure. Well, I feel that comedy writing is definitely something that gets easier the more you do it, kind of like anything. I mean, anything in life that you do more and more, you get better at. So what we try to focus on for people who really feel like they have a block is to really ensure to them that they have more content to work with than they realize. I mean, a lot of people think of like an empty whiteboard when it comes to being funny, but for example, as you can see from like the Halloween push notification, there oftentimes they have stuff there that's just begging to be made funnier that they can brainstorm off of. So we try to teach them tools that sort of will help them stand on the shoulders of their work, instead of just thinking that they have to create a masterpiece from a blank slide, basically.
Right. Keep their eyes open for all that humor that's everywhere. Keep their eyes open for all that humor that's everywhere.
Exactly. And my cat does not punch stuff up for people, but luckily no one has asked my cat to do that. Looks like Josh has a question. What are some strategies leaders to move away from traditional language and incorporate more humor? That's a great question. So there are several strategies that we recommend. Basically, it's easiest to start with stuff that's inherently more informal. So if they're sending out an all-staff note, that's way easier to add levity to, and it's appropriate for them to be more conversational. Trying to help them move away from traditional language in a more external setting, or if they're giving a bigger speech, they might feel less comfortable about because they've always done it the same way. But if it's something that's a little more highly produced anyways, content that usually has more eyes on it, which most comms teams are going to be heavily involved in drafting a lot of the communications that are coming out of leadership's email address. So we ask them to start small and informal, and then we hope that they use that engagement that they see from those little moments to really keep snowballing it into everything they communicate when it's appropriate for them to be joking. Obviously, there's some situations that are non-starters. Some change management situations are just too tricky to be funny about. So we just try to have a holistic conversation with them about the different areas that they need to communicate with their employees about, and the best opportunities to be funny, and how that will be appropriate. Can people learn to laugh? From Carl. That is a very, very tough question. I think most people can. I think a lot of it is just an innate thing that starts from when you're a baby, and I think it's something that in the development of a human being, some people develop it more than others. I think that people can learn cues and develop ways to take things, take jokes to heart more. I mean, honestly, I do come across people every once in a while who don't really seem to laugh, and I come across people that laugh all the time. So I think it's a spectrum, and I think you can learn to do anything, and some people have more of it in their DNA than others.
Peter, you work with our customers every day. Do they often ask questions about or have plans to use our platform to spread humor around the workplace?
Well, some of the performing content is definitely humorous in nature. The one that I think of that plays always really well is, of course, pets. Like if you have a cutest pet contest or funny pet pictures, that's classic. Or anything with babies, which I guess is humor, but is also sort of the awe factor. But yeah, any kind of content that touches that really human side. In work, it's often this feeling like you're putting on a professional face, and I think humor can cut through that to interact at a more human, basic level. That way, that we're all the same and can all relate to one another.
Right. Even via technology, correct? With some of our customers who have workers everywhere.
That's right, yeah, and that's what a platform like Base can help do, is connect especially to those non-desk workers, so that when you go to make a joke or you go to have those pet pictures on the platform, you've actually got an audience for it, and you've got people who are engaging with you and with each other.
Right. And there's always Charlie and and his partner at Laugh Dealer who can help all of us as well.
Here to help. Any tips on engaging a global audience? That's a very good question. So, I mean, if we're talking truly global, meaning all languages and visual, will always be the best way to engage with humor, whether it's a funny dog or cat video, as Peter astutely discussed. I think that anytime you want to engage a wide group of stakeholders, you have to just focus on commonalities and things that people can relate to. So if you do have to use text, and it can't be too visual, and it's in English, for example, just making sure that you're using concepts and themes that are very relatable: family, animals, nothing that's going to be too niche for certain parts of the world that might not have those in their daily life as much as we might in for example, Western culture. Well, that's a really great question. I would say dog videos, number one, and cat videos maybe tied for number one.
I'm sensing your theme. You're a cat person, Charlie.
Well, I just have a cat, and and our cat's very easy to take care of. We can leave her for a couple days, and she can survive. And it's hard to walk a dog multiple times a day and also travel. And and stay away from snow and blizzards.
Well, we are glad that she let you join us today.
Thank you, me too. Carl asks, using humor versus being ridiculous. So I think here the distinction is whether it's better to use more traditional verbal humor versus just more out there kind of maybe physical comedy, or I think that just kind of depends on your audience, and that kind of goes back to point of view and specificity of whoever you're trying to reach. So if your audience is a raucous group of people who are, you know, jumping off cliffs and hang gliding and doing extreme stuff, ridiculous might fit them better. If it's more of a sort of more traditional setting, I would say that ridiculousness can be a little tricky if you're trying to convey something a little more sort of just down the middle.
Right.
That's a good question.
I think so too. Carl, you can also, use a platform, I think, to measure your content and to measure the engagement with your workforce so that you can see if that ridiculous message really resonated or didn't.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, Carla, that we live in a time now where there's so much data available, and you really can see how well something performs, whether it's how many times a tweet is retweeted or how many click-throughs you have on an email that you send out, and that's a really powerful thing that 20 years ago people would just have room reaction, how loud an applause was or how many people laughed at the same time. But when you have something measurable like you do now, it can really help you tailor what you're doing. And if you send out stuff that's doing well, you can help to replicate that and stay away from some of the stuff that has lower engagement.
Nice. Charlie, it has been wonderful to have you with us today. I'm so glad that our paths crossed as Boston University Terriers and alums as well. That's right. But I would love for you to leave us with one work joke that we could take back to our offices. You up for that?
One work joke, putting me on the spot. So let me think about that. I had let me think of it. I used to have a lot of office jobs where I would hear a lot of mundane stuff, and I would make fun of the way that people would talk to me. So, people would say like, "Charlie, you were such a rock star in that meeting," and I would say, what do you mean? I'm not a rock star. Rock star would show up to the meeting 3 hours. Not a rock star. I take a multivitamin every morning.
That's good. That's good. All right. Charlie, it has been great. We will share your slide deck and a recording of this webinar with all of our attendees today. We also have another webinar coming up, and that is on Wednesday, August the 15th at same time, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern. And that is with Contact Monkey. We will be sharing 10 hacks for multi-channel strategies to create internal comms that get work done, wow your leaders in the C-suite, and also help to measure the impact. So you don't want to miss those as well. And then also, Peter, I will let you speak to this a little bit because this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, so if we've piqued your interest at all about going digital, going mobile, please come and see us at staffbase.com/demo and sign up for a demo and come check out what we're about and how we're helping other companies to connect with their workforce and indeed help you infuse humor into what you're doing.
That's
And for
right.
anyone who signs up for a demo out of this webinar, they will also receive for free a copy of Charlie's 30-minute stand-up album. So look out for that special offer and come in for a demo, and you'll get some humor alongside.
That's right. Come and share your jokes with us. We need some new ones.
Happy to do it.